chapter 7, 7 through 11. Ask, seek, and knock. And then we get this assuring word about who the Father is and the fact that he will answer as we do ask, seek, and knock. So it's a brief passage. We want to spend a little bit of time thinking through it a little bit more carefully, maybe getting to some application, some help, some encouragement. First off, just begin as we typically do begin, just asking for general reflections. So we have Lindsay, Chase, Mike, Howard, and myself, Dan, here. So we'll take a little bit of time here. If anyone has something, what's the Lord been doing in your mind and heart in this section, and as we're following it in the flow of the Sermon on the Mount. So who's got some responses? Kick us off.
Well, I would say that one of the quotes that you gave, so you preached, Dan, at the 8:30, the Magnolia service, and then Dave preached at the later two Sunday, but both of you communicated this. You, I think, had a specific quote from Scott McKnight about it. One of the challenges about this passage is it seems to almost be promising too much. It's like, ask, like for whatever. It seems pretty open-ended. Dave did a good job, too, of just saying, let it be open-ended. And but in the McKnight, you got a quote by Scott McKnight that was kind of like, a lot of Christian responses to this are not really satisfactory, because we do know that when Jesus is asking, it'll be given to you, not everything I've ever asked for, right, I've gotten. And there's other passages that seem to be pretty open-ended too, like ask and it'll be given to you, or he'll say, ask in my name. So there is kind of like a little bit of a qualification there, but so we try to answer it in a bunch of different ways. And Scott McKnight, I don't know him personally, but I've followed his writing and his work for a long time. So I know from his writings, he seems to be a pretty mature Christian. He's had a broad experience, multiple different denominations or whatever. And I'm like, oh yeah, if a guy like that is kind of like, well, I haven't found a ton of satisfactory answers, but I know that it's pointing me in a direction that I have to look to God's character and trust that he is good. And that's what the passage was doing as well, when he said, hey, your Father will know what you need and he'll give you those things. And I was like, that was just very helpful. I thought of, I definitely have tensions still. I definitely have questions why this prayer gets answered for that person and why that prayer doesn't get answered, like that, all those things, like I don't think are necessarily going away. And yet the passage still stands as God is a big, open, generous God that is inviting you to ask about everything. And I don't want to say more importantly than the requests, but as important as getting what you ask for, maybe it is more important, is coming to know him as Father. And so I just really appreciated that. I think there's a wise, mature outlook on prayer in that. So it keeps me praying, it keeps me pursuing, it keeps me hopeful, and yet I don't end up being entitled. I think I think sometimes a promise like this might actually produce like entitlement. So maybe this is a rabbit trail question, but do you guys ever wonder why the Bible's like not a little bit more careful with its language? Like almost why wouldn't Jesus say, like spell it all out
like
exactly?
Be specific every time.
Be specific every time. Or I was thinking about labels earlier about, there's times when, the whole conversation about men and women in ministry and all that kind of stuff, and Paul just calls Junia an apostle, and it's just like, he's just totally fine with it. It's just like, are we hung up on a bunch of like semantics that we shouldn't be hung up on? Because the Bible itself doesn't seem to be so careful about some of these things. So anyway, that was just a rabbit trail thought.
That goes in with my observation, actually, because the need for wisdom, I appreciated how both pastors tied this section in with the whole sermon. So lots of times growing up, I would just hear this section, which this section is amazing. It ties to a lot of things in the Bible, obviously. But as far as coming off of the weight of what we've heard so far, that need for wisdom and discernment just like was shining, and it was a relief. Like Dan made the statement that this is a tone of relief. It's like, oh man, I've got all this, I've got all these things I'm trying to think about, and I want to follow Jesus. And then it's like, well, ask, seek, and knock. And he's talking about there's a little bit of a progression there. The asking is humility. The seeking is like you're trying to discern, and you're like teasing it out, and you're looking at kingdom living, and you're trying to see what matches up and what doesn't. And then you're like knocking on doors, and you're you're kind of going step by step and you're
Mhm.
following the Holy Spirit because your Father will give you the Holy Spirit. So I just, in my mind, it tied together like never before. And it took a weight off of me
Mhm.
in a sense.
Yeah.
And like you said, draws you into seeking your Father because he's like got all these high expectations, and yet he's giving you everything you need to be able to follow him.
Yeah.
So
The wisdom literature is really good. That's what I was thinking when you asked that. I'm like, there's just a tendency in the human condition to like look for loopholes.
yeah, true.
We're just like not like, instead of like going to the scriptures and these ancient texts with like generosity towards the writers, we're like seeking to challenge them or something as we're approaching it, rather than just being like, what good thing is he trying to communicate to me right now, instead of like, well, I wonder if this means this for me. It's almost like that's how my kids act. They're just like, I give one a blue bowl and the other one a green bowl, and the one's like, why did I get the green bowl, not the blue one? I'm just like, I don't know, they're both bowls. It's just like kind of enjoy it, like whatever it is. But yeah, so I definitely liked the flow of the sermon into asking, and I do feel like it gives helpful parameters on what to ask for.
Mhm.
It's like kind of like reading Jesus and Matthew graciously here. It's not like ask and it'll be given to you. I wonder what I can ask for. It's kind of like ask and it'll be given to you. It's like, oh, okay, well, what's the context going on here? Oh, he's talking about all the things that would make our lives the good life. And what are those things? Oh, blessed are the poor, the challenging stuff. It doesn't make it easy, but it does give you kind of parameters like, oh, this is what God likes to do, like enhance my relationship with my Heavenly Father, help me to live in the reality of the kingdom among us, live not judging other people, all this kind of, like, that's a good way of living. And it's less about kind of a result thing and more about like, how do I keep in step with him and his commands and the way that, that's even what First John says. First John talks about, and whatever we ask, we receive from him because we keep his commandments and do what pleases him. He's just like, this is what I think he's talking about with asking, all that kind of thing. But anyways, that was a whole lot of things. But I think the wisdom literature is big. It's kind of like general principles and guidelines, and we're seeking to apply it to what they're saying into our lives.
I have an analogy for wisdom literature that I was thinking of, but it's okay. It's not great. It's the everlasting gobstopper. Nice. You know what I'm talking about?
Nope.
Oh, you don't?
I was
No.
not
Oh my
expecting
goodness.
that. This is
Gobstopper.
great.
Oh,
You can
Chase.
educate
Willy
you,
Wonka?
little guy.
So a
Right.
gobstopper is a piece of hard candy. For those listeners, I can't imagine them. If I'm younger listeners, maybe I have to explain this for you guys. A piece of candy. It certainly has red dye in it.
I was gonna say, there's definitely all kinds of dyes in that thing.
And it's just as you kind of chew on it or suck on it, like one flavor goes away and then another flavor comes and then another flavor comes, and so eventually it goes through. So maybe there's too many flavors there because the Bible's not like that multifaceted, but the wisdom literature does that to you. It's like
Yeah.
it forces you to think and to kind of chew on, and you get like one flavor of the text, and it's like, oh, then you come at it from another angle or whatever. It's like, oh, that's a different flavor. That's a different perspective on there. That's kind of filling out kind of what Jesus is saying here. And certainly in this situation, this is a flavor of prayer for us. It's like God has a big heart. He's generous. He's your Father, and he wants you to come. Like that's definitely one aspect of prayer. And it wouldn't be appropriate to like leave that at the door and be like, well, should I be walking in obedience, and should I recognize that he is God? Like, yeah, all those, that's another flavor too. They're both involved in kind of bringing the full picture together of what it means to relate to God in prayer.
Yeah, that whole like looking for loopholes thing and the bottom line, I think the relational thing with God as our Father is like, we definitely know it, we acknowledge it, we say it, but I know, at least for me, I think there is still lots more to be understood with this. When you're talking with somebody and maybe they're trying to explain or you're trying to explain, and then they or you, depending on how you want to approach this, I'll just say for me, if I am saying to this person, yeah, like, what are you trying to say? What's the bottom line of what you're actually trying to say? And what that communicates in a conversation, that you are there for like the product or the result or the information of the conversation. The relationship, you could care less about. We are simply here for what I can get. Okay, I know what you're saying. I've heard enough. I know what I need to do now. Maybe someone's giving you instruction or something like that. And so, I really think that how Jesus turns so quickly to the character of the Father, and like, wouldn't you think that God, your Father, would give you everything that you need? Of course he would, and he goes right into the character there. And for us to be like, well, yeah, but what kind of things do I get?
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like, I kept kind of thinking of this illustration, comparing God to a genie in the bottle, or comparing him to AI or something like that. And, every character, when they rub the lamp and the genie comes out, it's like, well, what do I wish for? Because it's not on the radar, and that's usually the big turn, is they end up caring about the genie and blah, blah, blah.
Become
blah,
friends.
Exactly. And everyone is
I want
happy.
the genie to be freed.
Yes, of course. You find relationship,
Yeah.
But really, if it's just somebody to provide you what you want, then yes, what should I ask for is the appropriate answer. But Jesus is like, that's not even really what this is about. This is about knowing God as your Father. And then as you know him and love him, then of course you ask for things that not only that you want, but that he wants and he wants you to have. So it's just very dynamic. It's not like a static thing. It's, going back to that bottom line or loophole kind of an idea.
That's really interesting. I'm like something was on the tip of my tongue. It was of like, it's not about what you're to ask for, but it's about who you're asking like from, basically. So, but anyways, that's really good. I was just trying to think about an illustration of like, if you're explaining, look at how awesome this Father is, who cares about you so much, who loves you, blah, blah, blah. And like, after all that, you're like, nice, okay. So what can I get out of this then? It's like,
Right.
What kind of thing can I ask this person for to almost like take advantage of his loving kindness or anything like that, if you were going to use it on your own passions or whatever. But, situations are different, and wisdom calls for different things that you need in different situations. So it might be something that's seemingly selfish in like in a vacuum or something, but in that situation, it might be something you actually really, really need or whatever. Like, if you really need a job at this point, you've been jobless for a couple months, it's like, it's not crazy to ask for a job. But if I have like 3 jobs and I'm like, I think I'd run a better one, it's like, okay, that might be weird. But that's just wisdom literature.
There's an interesting part in Dave's sermon when he was talking about like how we're supposed, like, this passage is about just coming and asking, and not any of those sort of things we learn in church about adoration, thanksgiving. And it was something actually that I hadn't thought about, but it goes with the idea of coercing or like sort of like buttering up so that you can get what you want, which is in this same vein. And actually Alex Kirk talked about prayer that way too. So I didn't know if anybody had any thoughts on that, because I'm like, is that right? Like, there's different ways or maybe different things happening in your heart, and you might just come with an adoration, but do you always have to think of it in some sort of framework? So yeah, because I think that a lot of us think of prayer like that for sure, and it can end up feeling more performative.
Yeah, I think that's somewhat motive related. If you're viewing that as the formula, it's like, oh, this is the biblical formula that unlocks the answers to my prayers. I think that's, potentially an issue. But I mean, those formulas are definitely, not the formulas, but the structure of that relationship is present in the scriptures. And it's entirely appropriate for me to come and just straight up ask, as Dave encouraged us to do. And I think that passage, not just Dave, but Jesus, Jesus doesn't qualify that there. So, but it's also entirely appropriate to address him. The Psalms do this a lot. A lot of the Psalms open up before the requests with a recognition of adoration of who God is and what he has done, and then leading into the request. So, I think when we talk about our relationship to God as our Father and that it is a relationship,
Mm.
it is a very comprehensive relationship. I mean, think about all the different ways that God refers to us.
Mm.
We are his children and we are his bride. It's like, there's something's going on there, you know. There's something going on with the ability that we can just come in and just ask very boldly, like a child would. You know, Chase mentioned a moment ago, just like there's a difference between a 5-year-old asking an adult for something or his parent for something and a 25-year-old asking his parent for something that might feel and look a little bit differently. And that's totally okay.
Mm.
And I think that's true. Dan, you said something that stood out to me. It's like, not only do our prayers change, but because we change as we get closer to God, then that changes our prayers. So like all that kind of stuff is involved there. So I don't think it's necessarily a right wrong. For me, as I received that from Dave, it's like more of an emphasis. And I think that's a good kind of emphasis to kind of draw out, because at least in our tradition, there's a lot more emphasis on the pattern more of like that he was describing than there is just kind of this bold free asking. And so I thought that was a good word.
Yeah.
He talked about, go ahead, Howard.
Oh, no, I was just going to, I guess, not even add on to it, but it makes me think about your relationship with the Father. I think about folks who may not be that in tune with God's character or the outsider looking in to come and know the Father and know how he feels about you and just develop that relationship. Like, where are you going to for your needs in the first place? Because we all know we want our needs met, or you have this dependency. It's like, I think I mentioned it earlier. I'm a father, and the last thing I want is my children going other places to get their needs met, be that as counsel, wisdom, guidance. And the Father's like, yo, if you know this, you feel this as being evil, you definitely can bet I know what you need. And that relationship is cultivated as you come to him seeking and build this relationship with him.
Yeah, that's where even like I don't want it to be like sometimes as, you know, teachers of the word, we like to pit one thing against each other. And I know I've had a tendency in the past. I'm trying to correct that. It's not, I don't think it's fair to say it in this passage. It's not about getting what you need. It's about relationship. I feel like that is too stark of a contrast.
Right.
Because there's so much about the passage that is saying, ask and you'll receive, seek and you will find, knock and it will be open to you. Yeah. And so a lot of this passage is about getting the things that God wants to generously give to us. And those things are, you know, we shouldn't be worshiping mammon, we should be worshiping God. So our request should be more kingdom, or all that stuff is true. But I just want to kind of hold those two things together. Like, I think I can look back in my life and be like, oh, God provided in this temporary means, which that provision is now old. It's gone. I don't need the thing anymore, but he provided it. But what it did is it built trust in my heart that he's with me and he's for me because of a tangible answer to prayer. And also vice versa. When God says no and those things don't happen, you pray for someone to be healed and they're not healed, that brings a challenge to us. You know, like, oh, okay, God said no to that. How am I going to respond now? And then I feel like the other side, not if it's even sides, but like the other aspect of this passage of him being my Father and him being in charge and having a plan is then where you dig in and when you trust even when physical things aren't there. So I just feel like holding those two things together is very important as we think about our relationship with God.
Yeah. You know, it's not as though if you dig into relationship that you'll like ask less.
Right.
You know what I mean? You'll ask more.
Yeah.
And so even kind of going back there, you know, right. You know, as you're talking about, Howard, like, you know, you want your children, those dependent on you, to come to you for those things, and you want to come through for them. And so we have that same experience with God as Father. And so as we continue to ask, as we continue to grow in relationship, right, like I would think we would be more, you know, more willing to bring more requests to him as we find him to be true. And as we get like this overwhelming sense that he does care for us, you know, even the other thing, you know, he knows what we need before we ask, and, you know, he cares for our needs. Look at the birds, look at the lilies, all of these types of realities. So yeah, that's really good. Like not separating or comparing those. It's not like it's right. It's not about this, but it is about this. It's like, no, it's about both of those things.
Yep.
And what a father does is he listens and he loves and he provides for, like, it's all just part of the package deal.
And sometimes as fathers in different stages, you say no to your kids because there's something bigger and better that they're doing. Dave talked about that, behind the no, there's a redemptive thing, bread or better, or at least as good as the bread is what I would say to Alex, and that's okay too. And some of those are, I thought about that sermon just to be like, perfectly honest, I was, on a jog and I was thinking, well, do I really believe that? I mean, we, in 2004, my sister was in a car accident and she died. She was on life support and we're praying, Lord, bring her back. Like he can do it. And he said no. And so I'm like, is it better? And so it's just challenging me to again, that was a long time ago, but that's, still relevant in my heart and my mind. There's been some big moments in the history of my family where we've asked God for something and he has said no, and it's been painful. And it's just like, okay, well, what am I doing now? What am I going to do now? And then can I see a bigger redemptive plan? And then to think, oh, well, if he took her at 21, and I'm like, and it's been longer now without her than with her. And it's like, oh, but I can see so many redemptive things, and her passing has done like remarkable things. And I'm like, oh boy, that is, so I'm just even, I thought that literally last night. And so anyway, don't be too hasty in your assessment of how the Lord is doing and what he's doing. When people first came to me at her funeral, by the way, I've shared this before, but they're like, oh, the Lord is really using this so much in my life. It used to make me, especially on the day of the funeral, I was very angry. My first thought was, well, get your act together. My sister wouldn't have to die. It's like, why do you think your discipleship is dependent on my sister's death? That is insane talk right now. Anyway, so that was probably rude in my heart, but that was what was going on. But now, 20 years later, I'm like, oh, maybe that was immature on my part. And it was so painful at that moment. I couldn't get there. But I'm like, oh, maybe there is something. There have been numbers of things. So, the mystery of prayer, the patience of it, processing it together, but holding those two things together of both relationship and answer, I think is a big part of what following Jesus means. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a testament, even that, of how we do change over the years. And it's not that I don't even think it's always that you're viewing it right now and wrong then. It's just like your experiences and your understanding and all of these things change. And so, putting it back into the earthly relationships with our family members, it's like the relationships just, the requests are green bowls and red bowls, and they become something different. And it's not that it's so shameful to ask for a green bowl. You know what I mean? It's just, it just changes. You know what I mean?
It was green and blue.
Realize you don't need it.
Yeah, it's kind of like if I, it's using that same illustration. It's like Haddon gets upset because I gave him that bowl and he wants a different colored bowl. But then I go over to my parents' house and I ask my dad for something or whatever, and he gives it to me, and I'm like, "Why'd you give me this one, not the other one?" He'd be like, "What are you talking about?"
Right.
Because he expects more from me. It's like I have matured to a point where I don't care about the colors of the bowls or whatever. You know what I mean?
Ideally,
it's like if I just were to walk into my dad's house and be like, "Hey, can I have a snack?" He'd be like, "What?" He'd be like, "Go get it." Like he wouldn't. He would tell me, "I'm not getting it. You go get it." So there can be a relational, parallel with our relationship, with our Father in heaven, who might be like, I'm not going to give that to you because I'm going to, help and work with you to get it yourself, or to, wait a little bit and figure it out or whatever. So anyways, it's just like any relationship. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. One of the things that Dave mentioned to me prior, so I know I mentioned it, I was thinking he mentioned it as well, that it's coming at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, so we have all of this insight as to what is important from our Father, and specifically the section on prayer, pray this way.
Yeah.
And so we are already actually given the content of what our prayer should be, and then here is more of like an assurance of what those prayers will result in. And so, sometimes, again, like kind of going back to the thing like, yeah, what's the bottom line? Or can I pray for this or can I not? It's like, boy, we have a lot of content here revealing what's important to the Father, revealing what he values, what he loves, like the ethic of his kingdom. And so letting that inform our requests, and then having, the confidence that he'll answer based on what he's already revealed, is really is a really helpful, connecting point to make.
I thought it was really helpful at the end. You mentioned 2 of them and Dave mentioned 3, but some sort of, some obstacles kind of that we run into, a lack of dependence, desire, and then the presence of doubt, which you talked about. And the question that we had on the screen at 8:30 is, do you ask for help? So are you a person that is prone to ask for help anyway? So, that might be something to meditate on. Like, am I somebody that views myself as lacking things that I would need someone else to help me with? And that could be, I know in my own life, it's like, well, sometimes I rather, if you want it done right, you just do it yourself. And so that's definitely something out there. And then the desire is, there's even a situation in my life right now where, if I'm honest, my desire is that I just want that to go away. Like, I just want to be at peace. But how would the Sermon on the Mount inform my desire? And it's okay for me to tell God that I want it to go away, but it's okay too for me to start to think of how the sermon is going to shape that desire. And then, have I lost hope? Sometimes I doubt that it's ever going to change, but again, you can go back to this, just ask, seek, and knock, and just keep doing it. And that's where, like Mike said, you just dig in. So I really liked those 3 points there at the end to help to evaluate. It's very helpful.
Yeah, Dan said the depending part, it was if you can do it yourself or whatever, you won't ask. And I think back to the sermon, it's I don't know. I think it would be hard as a follower of Jesus to look back at the sermon and go, totally crushing it.
Pretty good.
I just think wow, okay, there's enough, to bring heaven on earth and to live the kingdom ethic. There's enough content in there for me to be regularly asking, okay, Lord, help me to forgive. Lord, help me to keep my word. Help me to be faithful in my marriage, all these things. Help me to reconcile in a healthy way. Help me get the board out of my own eye, which I had a moment just while you guys were talking about those other things. I realized one of the things I feel like the Lord has done through my sister's death is he has changed me. So me being frustrated with others for how the Lord was using that, the Lord did the exact same thing in me. And I had a board in my eye for 20 years.
Wow.
Anyway, so it's just there's a lot there. And then the second thing you said, Dan, was for desire. If you don't, you ask for what you want. And so cultivating kingdom desire. So it's if you don't want kingdom desires, then you won't ask for those things. And so I actually think there's a practice in there of, you can actually just start asking, even if you don't really feel like it.
Yeah.
Just start asking for the thing is actually a means of cultivating a way to have a deeper desire, and then you ask more type of thing. So I've been experimenting with coffee. I feel like that's what's happening with me with coffee right now. I woke up this morning and thought, I wonder if I should have some coffee. And then I thought, no, I don't want to get down that road. But with a kingdom desire, it's okay, I want to trust the Lord with my whole financial situation. And so, Lord, help me be surrendered today to that, even if you may not feel that great. And then the desire cultivates more. So, those are definitely helpful little obstacles to identify and then overcome.
And there is a greater confidence that comes with asking for that. I'm almost like, yeah, he's going to answer that one. I know he is. Lord, help me to be more patient or whatever. Fill in the blank with whatever Sermon on the Mount thing that you're talking about. Yeah. It's help me to learn to forgive other people. And it's do I think he's going to be nah, I'm not going to answer that one. It's right. No, of course. That's what he wants. Yeah. It's I know what he wants. I know what he wants from me. And so if I can ask for those things, then I'm sure ask for the other things along the way. But I'm I feel there's just more confidence that comes with that. It's I know he's going to answer this one. Why wouldn't he? It's he's going to make me more like Jesus. It's a fruit
of the Spirit, and you have the Spirit.
Well, this isn't totally connected to this, but one of the prayer requests that has been answered in my life almost like it's almost genie in a bottle.
Whoa.
Is, Lord, give me an opportunity to communicate the gospel to somebody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I have been feeling that just on a personal level, like needing to engage that way more. And so I started praying that a few weeks ago. And like, I, got a text out of the blue from a guy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a guy that was on my radar before. Anyway, I
Uh-huh.
won't get into the whole thing. It doesn't need to be public on this podcast, but I'm just like, all right, there it is. It's just like literally out of the
Uh-huh.
blue. It's like, well, not out of the blue.
Yep.
Yeah.
And even in the asking,
good.
you become more aware. You become on the lookout.
Mm-hmm.
That's the whole patience thing. We're like, pray for patience, and then he's going to give you a situation where you lose your patience or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, you're just aware. You're like, where is it going to happen? Where is it coming from?
Mhm.
Oh, I get a random text from somebody. I know what's going on here,
That's good.
In the asking, you build the
Mhm.
awareness kind of it all too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one encouragement for like prayer books or prayer guides that work through regular themes is, they're regularly putting before you good themes, good requests to be praying for. You know what I mean? So things like evangelism, things like missions, things like submission, confession of sin, so to have those things regularly before you and to be praying them, right, your heart kind of follows after that for sure, to cultivate your loves. And then, it is really reassuring when you have this desire to pray for something and it's like, it's so on the nose of something that the Father loves, so that's where it's like, oh, I can almost feel my will aligning with his
Right.
will,
Yeah.
That's it.
Sure.
It was one of the things, I didn't really mention this at all, but in the second, see what if you have any thoughts about this, but if a father asks, or if a son asks for bread, would he give him a stone, fish, serpent, fathers who are evil? You've got evil and you've got serpent in there, which if you're familiar with the storyline of the Bible, you're like, devil.
Yeah.
And earlier in the temptation of Jesus, the devil says,
Turn the stones into bread.
yeah, if you are the Son of God, invoking that father-son relationship. And I remember we made the point there, like, what he's going after is not just the hunger, but like, does your father have a really good plan coming after, right after, of course, this is my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased. And so even though it feels like, I don't know how many months ago that was, it seems like quite a while ago, but we're just a few pages forward where Jesus is coming on the scene. He's getting affirmed. His sonship is getting affirmed in his baptism. Then it gets immediately challenged, stones to bread. And then, Jesus is here inviting us into that. And it's like, what father is going to give you the stone when you ask for the bread? And then even that serpent, I think, is a little bit of just a nod of like, there's an evil way to process this whole thing. And there is also like a kingdom of righteousness to process that whole thing. And so, to think this of your heavenly Father would be from the evil one, it was something like that.
Yeah.
And so I just thought those were interesting little, like, almost trigger words that Jesus uses there just to kind of bring more of the story into play. Some of the things we've seen
I don't
already.
know if it can really be overemphasized in the Sermon on the Mount. When you're looking in the Sermon on the Mount for like God's grace, you see a lot of the commands in the Sermon on the Mount, of course. We were challenged by that, but it's like, where's the grace? Where's the empowerment? Where's the, all that kind of language? I think those are good questions to ask, and it's just repeated again and again and again. I think it's 22 to 24 times. I can't remember. I counted one time, but the term Father or your heavenly Father or our Father, whatever, 24, 22 times is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sermon is just, that's a huge, huge thing that's going on in this letter, and it's been, or in this section. And multiple different preachers have said this, and it's so good for us. Jesus is inviting us into a relationship with God as our Father, the same way that He had a relationship with God as His Father. It's just incredible. And so we're going to face those same temptations of like, He just got baptized, He was just declared to be the Son of God, and now Satan's going to immediately try to undermine that. And as we go to live this out, if we aren't having faith and we're not receiving the relational side that God is our Father, and what He's calling us to is good and holy and right, then we really don't have we really don't have a shot at living
Mhm.
out. But if we do, if we're convinced in our hearts that God is our Father, and that's why He keeps bringing it up again and again and again and again to us, then we will be able to have the faith we need to go into obedience.
Well, this coming week, we're on to the next single verse, right? The
Mhm.
golden rule.
Ooh.
So pretty simple enough of a preview. Matthew 7, verse 12, that familiar golden rule. Any
Mhm.
other kind of thoughts that we can have moving forward to kind of
Chase is
prepare,
preaching, and I'm preaching.
to
Anything?
prepare ourselves?
No, just think about that for a while. Just take 7:12 and think about it.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the it's more of a summary thing. Like, so it was this prayer one was a summary, and this is kind of, if prayer is kind of like the relational summary of like, oh, this is what we need. This is kind of he's going to take the whole rest of the sermon and put it pocket size for you. You can literally just put it in your pocket
Love it.
and take it everywhere you go. You don't have to remember every single section every single time. It's like, this is something. And I also think it's a little bit of a power move by Jesus to take the golden rule and say, actually, this belongs to me. So
Mhm.
you'll find out more what that means Sunday.
Yes.
For sure.
Amen.
Good.